Hello, 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 and welcome to DevHeads, the podcast focused on the ins, outs, and goings on of game development with host experience from indie double to triple A. I'm Jay, and I'm joined today by my wonderful co-host Tina.
Hi, how's it going? I'm the AAA dev.
Oh, and Mikey.
Oh, I'm the AA dev, and I'm Mikey.
And I'm the indie guy Jay. Hello. And today we don't have a guest because we thought we'd take the time to do something that we feel would you say neglected, guys? Not intentionally.
Yeah, a little
bit.
Not too much.
Bit. Yeah, we could have done a better job at what we're about to say.
New Year's resolution
Yes.
for this year is to be better, community-driven, engaging podcasts co-hosts, right? So we have a Discord channel on Second Wind that you can join. Is there any rules or anything that they need to follow to join, Jay? I'm not really sure.
Don't be a dick.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, if you are a dick, you'll be kicked. Don't be a dick. Come in and you can access the wealth of channels we have in there for all of our shows. One of them being the DevHeads channel.
Yeah. So I'm in there, Mike's in there, Jay's in there. We'd love to take your questions, any thoughts, concerns you have, even if it's off the cuff, we don't mind. And I made a list of a bunch of those questions to read on the show in no particular order, but I want to make sure that this year we're a lot better about this. So thank you for being patient with us. These questions came in 2024 and some came in just this week because I put a call out to everyone, and then I guess pinging everyone on Discord wasn't appreciated by a lot of people. I didn't know that would. It's really funny. Anyways, that won't happen again. So we'll start off with Snake in the Garden. She asks, can you share experiences working globally doing game design? A lot of community are in IT, and I know I spend a lot of time helping engineers listen and understand better as... right? Cultural differences can be perceived as lazy, aggressive, loud, quiet, cold, etc.
Yeah, what's it like to work globally?
I feel like I'll jump in if I may.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got a decent amount of experience doing this because I started doing game development remotely by myself in my home in New Jersey, right where I grew up. And I started working with ex-modders who, as they saw Fanar, were like distributed all around the world. And we didn't really have an office. This is at New World Interactive. We did have an office at different points, like I think at one point in LA, in Denver, in New York City. But it was always small, and it was like the entire team, usually, as far as I know.
How many
and
developers
this was like,
are we talking about here?
Let's see. Depends on the year. I'm going to go with the year that I like around when I started, which I guess would have been like late 2013.
And you're all scattered around the globe?
Talking on Skype, yeah.
Oh,
And it wasn't like,
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty difficult. It was pretty difficult to do a lot of communication. But one thing that I think helped was everybody was distributed for the most part. And to answer your question, I think it was like, God, I want to say like 15 to 25 at that point, somewhere around there. And then it eventually grew into like 30 and then 40, 50. But basically, we had people from, all over. We had Europeans, we had people in North America, we had people, we had at least one Australian, one Brazilian. I think they were working remotely from those places. I have to double check. But basically, everybody was in their spot, and it was very international. There wasn't too much of like cultural issues, I think, because we were all, I guess, mostly Westerners. So like culturally, as far as communication and like directness and giving feedback and stuff like that, there wasn't much tension about that. The Dutch because there were Dutch people on our team, we eventually went to Amsterdam, are characteristically direct, it said culturally, but we didn't experience that. I just think because we were all kind of homogenized by the internet and gaming. I don't know. Like that's kind of how I thought about it. But overall, it worked pretty well. The thing that I noticed brought more challenges was when eventually we decided to open up a studio. After we released Insurgency, we moved to Amsterdam, and we also already had another studio in Colorado, in Denver, in Western U.S. That was difficult, though, because now instead of having everybody kind of be distributed and by themselves, for the most part, you had a clot here of developers on this side of the globe and a clot here of developers on this side of the globe. and distributed. You had everything. And this was all pre-COVID, by the way. Like I'm talking like I guess we opened up the Amsterdam studio in 2017 or something. And this was a challenge because people in this clot make a decision, but they didn't tell everybody else in the world or this clot. And then this clot goes and they make their decision, and now everybody's misaligned, right? That I think was the biggest issue. There weren't too many cultural communication issues. I think it was part of the question that I noticed, at least. But that was my experience.
So I am really grateful that working on Call of Duty, I was exposed to the global game dev community just because of how many devs are required to finish one game. So I think the biggest eye opener for me when I started in game dev was, I would collect all the localization strings and audio files that we needed to send off to Dublin, Ireland, which is where they do all the loc. And we would send it to them, and I'd wake up in the morning and then there'd be everything checked in, and it just felt like nice for me knowing that while I was sleeping there was still progress being made on the game that I could tangibly feel and see. That the same goes for international design studios that worked with us as well, sister studios. People in different time zones definitely can tackle game breaking bugs in the middle of the night our time. And when I wake up, some of them were solved, and I was like, that's cool. Like it just felt like a never ending constant machine of awesomeness. And so as a producer, you're like, hell yeah, we're making progress. But it was also extremely difficult to schedule, and I'll explain why. So when we would have key meetings for big features that were scattered across the globe, we would have to bring everyone together. It was hard for me to deal with people in Asia, other parts of Europe, parts of Canada. We had people in Australia, and I always had to think from a mindset that was not necessarily a Pacific time zone, right? So if I said, I want to schedule this for Friday, I actually can't because half of the team is on vacation for the weekend, right? And so those were kind of like a little bit difficult to deal with. A lot of people would forget about that, especially holidays. So I had to be like a global eyes on, stalker, I guess, of their country's news as well, because I needed to keep an eye on, okay, what's Canadian holidays? What's Australian holidays? What's France's holidays? And then keep that in their schedules as well to like, oh my God. Like, so scoping stuff was just like next level chaotic. It was almost like bumping up the difficulty in Tetris or something. And I think the most culturally significant interaction I've seen personally was an engineer that I still talk to. She worked at Nintendo previously before working with me. So she was used to Japanese game developers having crisp, clean design specs that they weren't going to change, like for sure, handed over to the engine team. So they knew what they were getting into. They knew why features were needed. They knew how they're going to be used. And that's how they would start writing code. Whereas in Western game dev, we don't know what we want. We just ask for stuff, and sometimes it may not work. And it makes things extremely difficult for engineers because you may hand a special tool or a button or something over to a designer, and then you may not know how they use it, and then it may completely screw up performance. For instance, someone says, I want, a really fast fire rate on this gun. You're like, okay, here you go. You don't know how often it's going to be used. You don't know how it's going to be balanced or anything yet. You just give a designer what they want. They may say, oh, you never have to take your finger off the trigger. It's just going to keep firing bullets nonstop, and they're pretty accurate. And you're like, oh God, in a server with like 100 people, that's going to suck. Right? So you don't know how much work you're creating for yourself as an engineer when you hand something over. So there's a little bit more of like a push and pull between design and code, I feel, in Western culture or in US game development that I've seen, where it's almost adversarial sometimes because the designer is trying to make something really fun. They don't want to worry about all of these other issues they may hit in the future. They're just trying to focus on getting something in. And the engineer is thinking about the future, saying, hey, if we lay this groundwork, it may be bad for X, Y, and Z reasons. And sometimes designers don't want to deal with that right away. Or sometimes the design may go a different direction in the middle of it and code changes completely. So it's almost like when as a producer scheduling for code in the US, you have to really consider that the first iteration of a feature you give designers may not last at all. So just consider adding, version 2, version 3, a bug fixing thing, a performance part of the feature. It's just like it changes. But anyways, I hope that makes sense. Did I explain myself well? I hope I did.
Yeah, it makes perfect
kind of
sense.
Rambling. Yeah.
So many difficulties. I've never encountered it on the scale you guys have, because a lot of the things I work on are a lot smaller. It's increased a lot now since I've come to the US. Obviously, the main people I work with either from the Netherlands or the UK, so our time zones are very different. And looking at prototyping some projects at the moment and like working with my main programmer is so difficult, because if we want to set some time aside, which is very difficult to find for both of us, as we both have already quite demanding jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's even harder now, because by the time I get up at a reasonable time, he is finished with his day and is done, right? So I have to like change my workflow to hand him stuff to be like, this is what I want. Like, I've designed the systems. This is what I want you to do to implement them. And then we have to have these roundups afterwards and be like, okay, well then what point have we got to? What issues have we encountered? And it's a lot harder, and I'm trying to get used to it, but it's just going to take some time to adjust, right? It's just the way it is. We're back. Okay, so the snippets you heard of what Tina just said, you will not be hearing again. That was meant for just us.
So esports is a whole thing. Like, you have to be mentally prepared to interact with esports. I would not encourage any game developer to just jump into it blindly. Like, there's a lot of things to consider. First of all, you have to be the kind of person that has a heart surrounded by steel, right? Because you're going to get like the worst of the worst feedback, but also have to be extremely professional with this person, even though they're saying the meanest, disrespectful things to you. And I'm not saying all esports players are like this, because they are not. Some are very cool. There's a lot of them that I like. I'm just saying there could be a player or two that gains traction and popularity on YouTube or Twitch or whatever they're playing on. And at the peak of their, their career, they may say, I'm just going to say verbatim what some of these people may say. They would say, like, this game is absolute dog shit. Don't play it. Don't even give them a chance. I previewed it. It sucks. Right? Not understanding that playing a game before it's released doesn't mean that it's a polished, finished game sometimes, right? Yeah. So, that
it's
hurts.
The nature of the beast, though, right? You're right. Heart of steel, but like, this is something I always try to tell myself. This is a bit of a tangent, but they're the consumer. You're giving them the product. Their opinion is always valid in the sense they should always have a sense to say it. And then you ask them, okay, how so? And then you determine, okay, is this good feedback? Is this actionable? Yada, yada. But yeah, it's just kind of how it goes. And you absolutely do, as you say, need to fortify your heart, because you do start to get a little agitated by it inevitably when you do it for years and years.
I mean, we're all human, right? And you're doing something extremely vulnerable, which is what we always say. Making a game is very vulnerable because you're putting your personal touches on something that means a lot to you. So when you're dealing with esports, they may not always have a full perspective or understanding of how their feedback is going to impact the entire game. So as a designer, it's your responsibility to do that. So if they say, nerf this weapon or get rid of this ability or something like that, that may work for them and their play style, but their play style may not match the entire ecosystem and what's good for the entire ecosystem, right? So it's an ongoing, constant, nonstop, interactive I don't want to say fire. It's just community, right? So it never ends. Once you open that door, it's always there, which is a good thing. But also, it's just a matter of balancing what's good for the game overall and what's good for esports. And sometimes dividing the communities and having rules specific to esports tournaments is sometimes the only way. But it is adding esports features is it can be time consuming and costly on the development cycle, right? So it's something that needs to be considered because, what if they want a replay camera of a match that they just had? Or, there's a lot of features that you need to put in, especially for people that are casting an entire game. That can be a big deal too. So it's just time consuming. You're basically asking for another huge pillar of the game that you need to support without I don't know, patience, right? Like they don't always necessarily have the game development perspective. So if you tell them, "Oh, this is going to take 6 months," that's not okay, right? You got to be committed to being pretty rapid with reacting to the competitive community and having the foundation with build and release and patching things like that. That's a whole another thing you need to have completely solid before interacting with esports, in my opinion.
Rough. Yeah.
There you go.
Super rough. And a lot of the times, like you were saying, Tina, competitive players may have an idea of what's good for the game, but that's only from their perspective and their level of play.
Mm-hmm.
There's something I've seen a lot in Marvel Rivals where there are a lot of characters that could use some buffs to be able to be viable at the higher levels of play.
Yeah.
But if you do that, that will make them completely busted in low level play. Like they would dominate. So you can't do that, right? And so you can't please both. You have to upset one of them, right? And sometimes you do need to try and please the competitive side, especially if there's a huge esports scene, because they're bringing in a lot more eyes to your product than the casual players are. So you have to. It's this balancing act, and I do not envy the teams that have to try and keep that balance stable because it's gross.
I would also argue that the people with the entry level skill set may not be as vocal as the people with the perfected skill set.
Yeah, agreed.
So it can be a storm in a teacup too sometimes with some of the issues that competitive players bring up.
Definitely.
Okay, what else? Command line Volpine says, "What exactly is optimization? How have the hosts implemented it in their own games?" And I'm paraphrasing this person. They were asking specifically about a game that was like 300 gigs or something crazy like that. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but yeah, they were asking like, why the hell is a game so heavy?
Mm-hmm. All right, so optimization is a tricky one to get into because it varies from game to game and what engine you're using. It's really tough to do, but a lot of the times it can either be used to reduce file sizes, or in a lot of cases it's to make the game run smoother on a wider variety of devices. So that can extend from condensing particle systems to not include bloated systems, so they're not like using a lot of resources. Or it can be as simple as Tina was explaining. Sometimes the rate at which this gun fires, or how it's being calculated, times over 100 players, is too much for the server to handle. So we need to optimize how we calculate how these bullets are done. Mikey, you've experienced something of this with bullet velocity, right?
With that, we did have an interesting bullet system in Insurgency Sandstorm, where it was a hybrid system, where if you shot at somebody and it was within a certain distance, it would basically be hit scan, or it would simulate the shot as if it were hit scan. I can't remember exactly how he did it, and I'm not an engineer. And if it went beyond that distance, then we simulated the bullet more realistically, I guess, and we took more factors into account. And this was done, at least in part, because of optimization. I think
Yeah.
in the documentary we did right back with Nick Calandra and everything, we talked a little bit about that. The engineer who worked on it, Steven Swires, I think, he talks about. I can't remember exactly. That was one optimization. Anecdotes for me when it comes to optimization is like, as a team with this project in Insurgency Sandstorm, it was very difficult because we had worked on the source engine, right? The engine that Half-Life 2 and other non-Valve games like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, like there were some other source games as well. And there wasn't like a ton of support at the time available. Like there weren't a lot of games that were also shipping on source, but like we knew it because we were modders. And then we jumped to Unreal Engine 4. And that was a huge, difficult thing for us. And as you'd expect, switch to a new engine, new tool set, optimizing was difficult. And also like we just didn't, there were certain decisions we made that like weren't great decisions. I'll give you an example that's like pretty easy to imagine. We made a helicopter, right, in the game, and we made it super high poly, super high def, and it looked really good. So whenever it was in the game, like that's another thing to render. That's another hit against optimization. And then we realized after we did that, hold on a second.
Oh my lord. Hello guys, sorry about that. We're having some problems with specifically Google in Eric's region, who is our wonderful podcast producer. It's completely out of our control, so I had to then quickly cobble together this so we can stream. So hopefully you can hear us. And can I get a hello from Tina and Mikey just to confirm?
Hello. I look dark, right? Do I look dark? So does Mike. Anyways, that doesn't matter.
I might be able to brighten you up.
I look all tan. It's fine.
Oh no.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we like tan. It's fine. It's fine.
It's all good.
Where were we? We were talking about optimization. We were talking about
Mikey's helicopter in the sky.
My helicopter.
LODs.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit. So I'm going to just come back to it. Again, thank you everybody for bearing with us. Sorry about this technical difficulty. We're going to look into it. Helicopter in Insurgency Sandstorm was super high definition when it didn't need to be, was essentially what I was saying. We made a mistake, you could say, in regards to optimizing the game and making it run smoothly, where we made something super high definition that's all the way up in the sky and doesn't need to be. And I don't think that we set the proper LODs or level of details, which reduces the quality of things that are far away. That's what I remember about it. And also, taking out of account whether the LODs or the LODs were set or not, why spend all this time and money to get a super badass looking helicopter that you just don't ever see, right? If you do have to lot it. That's at least my quick anecdote about optimization.
It's something that a lot of artists fall into the trap of nowadays, like with things like Unreal Engine 5 and the Frostbite engine and stuff. We're running into instances where it is a lot more viable to run high poly models through the engine and have them be rendered in real time. But back in the day when I was learning, right, like your models having too many polys would be a huge issue, right? It'd be like you can't do that. But now it's a little bit easier. But a lot of instances you can make your models way simpler and use, the roughness and height maps and stuff like that through texturing to give the illusion of depth and complexity rather than having it be complexity in the polys themselves. And luckily, both technologies are getting a lot better, so it's getting a lot easier to optimize games and have them run smoothly. And that's probably why we're seeing a lot of games recently having high download rates, as in having high gigabyte costs to download them, because games can run bigger and bigger environments, bigger and bigger, poly counts. So the need to optimize them and have them be smaller isn't really there anymore. So the cost of how much it takes to download is also going up. It's a weird push and pull.
Yeah. I think one
in
of
the
my,
interest of time, why don't we... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say let's move to the next question, but go ahead.
Oh, I was going to add that part of my unofficial job when I was on COD was to help optimize each level that was being loaded. So I would open up the map file, and we had the structure where everything that had to be loaded in the map was at the top of the file. And so there's a lot of props and stuff that weren't really being used, effects that weren't being used. And one of the engineers I worked with had this sly method of trying to keep memory in check by loading files that didn't need to be there to keep the designers like, behaving properly, I guess, through
Yeah.
development, and then he'd remove them and be like, "We're optimized."
You would just
That is
he was
so good.
attaching weights to everyone. Then
Yeah.
look,
He's like, "We
look
did
how
it."
great it is now.
Yeah. It
Oh
was
no,
very
this
funny.
level's so unoptimized, and then they come over and delete the bottom like 40 of the prop list,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
suddenly runs perfectly. What a wizard! Give this man a raise.
I know. He is now I think a tech director. Shout out to that dude.
Well, there you go.
Well
He's an
deserved, brother.
innovative
Well
person.
deserved.
Thinking outside the box and under the
Yeah.
level. Haha.
Yeah. All right. Lord Robert wants to know about if there is, I mean, there is, but what the hierarchy is in decision making in game development. Like, who decides on diversity in gaming? And I think this question, this is paraphrased from Lord Robert, but I believe that it comes from the concern a lot of gamers had on the internet lately, which is, is an outsourced company making a big call on design decisions in a game? Who wants to go first?
Well, I think I mean I'll jump in on the outsourcing part, and this sounds like a non-answer, but it's the truth. It really depends. You could have an outsourcing company be talking to the people who hired them and saying, "Hey, we need direction from you. Give it to us," and it won't be provided. And the outsourcer just says, "Like, all right, we'll just have to make this creative decision ourselves." It can also just as easily happen where the other company is giving the outsourcer direction. In my experience, that's usually how it works. There's always a degree of like, hey, I'm hiring you to do this thing. You have autonomy. Make the best creative decision you can. That there's usually an element of that. But if you're hiring somebody to do something for you in an outsourcing context, there's always at least some oversight. That's kind of in my in my experience how that all works. As far as the
Hierarchy?
hierarchy and decision making, yeah, I guess if we're talking like specifically with creative, it also really depends on a team. You could have a
Yep.
game director, or creative director, or a lead game designer, or somebody making all the high level design decisions. They have to be receptive to feedback, right? And they have to say, oh, well, here's what I want to do. But if the team says, oh, that won't work for a technical reason, or oh, we don't like that from a creative design or gameplay angle or whatever, then they have to be receptive to that. So while there is a hierarchy, you always need to be mindful of taking other people's feedback. On the teams I've been on, like speaking to Double A, there's a lot of autonomy where it's just like, hey, do this, take it, run with it. Keep in mind what our design pillars are, and whatever decision you make, take those into account, and then let's go. And if it ends up being something that the game director or creative director or lead person doesn't like, then they could say, well, guys, this doesn't align with the vision. This doesn't align with our pillars. Let's not do this. Pillars, by the way, being your sort of the stakes that you stick into the ground that say, okay, whatever we do with this game, we have to have pillar A be abided by, pillar B be abided by. In Sandstorm, I can't remember exactly all of our pillars, but it was stuff like hardcore gunplay, high lethality, low time to kill combat, minimal HUD. Like these might be pillars or underneath the pillar of realism, right? So if somebody's doing a feature and they say, I don't know what direction to take this, there's so many. What are the pillars? Authenticity, realism. Okay, then I should do it this way to fit underneath that pillar. That's how I would describe it, the hierarchy at least, and in my experience, mostly in AA.
Yeah. Well put.
Hierarchy's been a little bit chaotic in my experience because at one studio it was the higher the title, that person can make a call if they want, like, bring down their hammer and say, this is what we're doing. One example of that is saying on stage in front of all of these people watching the reveal of your game that you're going to have a beta in 2 weeks when that wasn't really a thing. And as you're watching at the studio, you're like, holy crap, the CEO said we're going to have a beta. I guess we should work on that.
Oh
Dude,
my
that's
god.
fucked up. That's
Yeah.
egregious. How'd that happen? Holy shit, dude.
It was the same company that
Was that?
where they
Yeah,
would
sorry,
like
go ahead.
the I don't know, like a director from the publisher would come in and be like, my son really likes this color. We should have that. And they're like, yeah, we like, Transformers, blah, 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 this scene. And we're like, okay.
Oh.
You've
like
described this
this,
before, Tina. And
yeah, this was like 10 years ago or 12 years ago. At other studios, like at one studio I worked at, everything had to go through the game director. everything, every creative decision that was a debate had to go through the game director, which was the worst bottleneck you could have in a studio of like 300 to 400 people, right? So if they decided, oh, we want this boss battle to be 10 people instead of 7 or something like that, let's do a review with the game director and schedule it with him to like look at it. Look at his schedule in the calendar. Oh, it goes out for like the next 3 weeks. Okay, we'll have a decision about going from 7 to 10 in a month and a half. It's like, that's not, in my opinion,
Yeah,
that's
that
not
shit
great.
is.
It's disgusting.
It's not sustainable. It's not
yeah.
realistic.
The best hierarchy I've worked with, I can't even define because it was assumed by everybody and respected by everyone in a weird, nebulous, unspoken way. So, like, the art director handled character art, but if designers had feedback or anyone else had feedback, like, that was taken seriously, especially if it pertains to your ethnicity, right? Like, so if
Yeah.
there's a woman on screen and they got all the feedback from women on like the clothes or something.
Thigh gap.
There was a yeah yeah really wide. um, there was other moments where each designer working on a particular feature owned that feature and was the top of the hierarchy, except in times when their boss would give them some feedback, and sometimes it was just feedback and sometimes it was just a directive, and you
Yeah.
had to know what that gray area was. But
Yeah.
so it's I wish I could write down on paper what the rules were for this weird nebulous hierarchy that was divided amongst everyone, but I found that was the most efficient in making a really good game really quickly.
If I may, Tina,
Yeah.
here's the thing. I think it's just kind of like a bit of a secret sauce because
Yeah.
every team has. You can have
It's a
like a
different-
formal
yeah.
hierarchy, but it gets a little softer in certain areas with certain decisions, just like you're saying. And when you get on a team that has an established hierarchy where it just works and everybody knows who to go to make a decision and what they're cool just making a decision on themselves,
Yeah.
it's awesome. You're all just in sync as a team, and that's just team dynamic stuff.
It's hard
right?
to
Not even exclusive
duplicate.
to
It's a cultural thing. It depends on every person's personality, how strong they are in their particular genre of work as well.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
that in
no,
indie, just on a smaller scale. Well, in my experience, a lot of the times it boils down to, because everyone's wearing so many hats, you kind of need to make these decisions on the fly and just try stuff. But also, we have people that are specifically in charge of a certain thing. So, for instance, the projects I'm working on, I'm in charge of sound and level design. So, if I'm debating with the artist about how this room should look or how it should be laid out, my opinion has a bit more weight to it because I'm the lead level designer. But at the same time, if we're in a disagreement on how things should be done, we always then bring that to the wider team and ask them. That's when it goes out to the wider team. And then if
yeah.
the team decides one way or the other, that's the way we go. And sometimes the team disagree with what they're saying or they disagree with what I'm saying, right? And you just
Yeah.
need to
and then
take what your
ultimately,
team wants to do.
Here's one thing I'll add, and then maybe we can move on because I don't mean to talk too much on this point, but you should always have a person who it comes down to them. You don't want to have a issue where like everything's so decentralized. You need consensus from everybody. That sucks. At the end of the day, sometimes someone's got to make a decision because there will be inevitably disagreement, and everybody else has to say like, okay, we just trust you. So that is an important part of development for sure. There's a reason why humans have been centralizing authority for centuries.
All right.
So next one, yeah.
Brutal Lord Cyrus. I would love to see a DevHeads podcast on when we considered a game finished in development. In music, there's a concept called mastering, and it's essentially the last step in producing a song. But with games, at least from the development side, it's difficult to know from a production point of view when the game is done making. What should a ship-ready game look like?
Funny to me. Well, here, I went first last time, so Tina, Jay, go for it.
What is it? Does it run?
Does it run?
So, when you're shipping a game on a PlayStation or an Xbox, or Nintendo, they as publishers have their own set of rules that you need to abide by, and they need to put a stamp of approval on it before a game goes out on their system. So they have their own kind of fail-safe for what a finished game looks like. There's certain things like if you pause the game and you walk away, the controller and everything still needs to be plugged in. If the game needs to pause if the controller gets disconnected, things like that. Like there's just basic operational things that you need to have. In terms of being the game developer itself, what does a finished game look like? I've seen people try to define this in so many ways, but the high level summary of it is: does it run? Can we live with some of the minor bugs that are live? Can we fix them later? Can people save the game properly? That's a big one.
Yeah. I like to think
yeah.
of it in terms of, I think those are really good ones. Like this is, again, totally team dependent, totally project dependent, yada yada. But let's just say we have some principles, because that's what we're kind of talking about anyway, in generalizations. Yeah, can you save it? Are the bugs minor enough for like you don't crash? And another one for me is like a game's done when it feels like you can play it. I guess I'm assuming a certain level of production here. I'm assuming a game that's like between
Minimum.
$20 to $80, but like you could play it for the hour 10 feels different from hour 100, feels different from when you first start, right? To me, a game is finished when you have some sense of like, as I'm playing this game, my experience is changing. I'm not just doing the same thing over and over and over. Obviously, that doesn't apply to everything. Doesn't apply to every genre, like mobile or just like less expensive games. Uh, these are all subjective terms, but generally, I think that's another important piece to: is our game finished? Like, do we have more than just a core loop? Do we have more than just you play hour 1 and hour 10, they look exactly the same?
Yeah.
I think you need to have a team define what the minimal viable product is, or what people call MVP in game dev. I think another thing that's critical and different now than like a decade or so ago is back in my day, we used to like burn a CD, a physical CD, and that was like the final gold disc that we would send off to distributors so they could print more copies of the game and send out in boxes to people.
Oh,
And that,
gold.
yeah, go in store shelves. That's not as that still happens, but it's not as a big deal anymore. A lot of people say, "Oh, we just hit gold, but F gold, we're gonna have a day one patch that you have to download before you can play the game." So
Yeah,
it's almost like more time to fix bugs and stuff.
all that
And if
shit
you,
got less defined. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, when you have a live game that's updated periodically, like it's never necessarily done.
Yeah.
Think about the ambiguity now of terms like alpha, beta. Now we have pre-alpha. Like, there's no like set rules for any of this. It's
No.
just about like messaging that you hope will come across as far as setting expectations. And similarly, when it comes to like shipping games, like going gold doesn't really mean what it used to. Doesn't really mean much anymore, right? When it comes to day one patches, as you said.
Yeah.
Jay, what about you? What do you think?
Well, I think because of it's kind of the theme of today's episode, the word nebulous. Because of the nebulous nature of how different games are, the term MVP can be incredibly dangerous to some devs, because the way you scope your MVP can a lot of the teams I've seen and worked with, if our MVP was what we would release with as a minimum, they'd be in trouble, right? A lot of the times, MVP can be your core loop, and it to a degree where it's playable and it has your art assets in and it is a full loop. But as Tina was saying, multiplayer games that are live services, your MVP could come a lot earlier than with some other games, because you plan to update your game periodically to keep people interested, right? So that release could come a lot sooner. I'm in the state where I'm mid development on my first few projects, so I haven't gone gold on a project just yet. But the project I'm most invested in at the moment. The thing I'm worried about is, when do you stop? because you can always add more. You can always fix those tiny bugs, and you can always be like, okay, well then, can we push the release back? Can we do this? Can we spend another year on it so we can squash all these things? And there has to be a point as artists where you have to put the pencils down and the brushes down and be like, no, this is enough. We have to get this out, like, because otherwise you'll just be working on it infinitely. So I think knowing when to stop and when your product is ready is a really important thing that I'm hoping I can deal with when I get there.
The most
When do you
irritating.
just decide let's take this and put it in the sequel, or let's take
Exactly,
this and put
right.
it in another project? You're
Yeah.
totally right. That's a huge part. Go ahead, dude.
The most irritating thing I've experienced is there was a lead producer that once just decided on this date we're closing all of the lower level Jira bugs. On this next date we're gonna close all of the like P3s, and then the next date P2s, and then P1s, and then blockers. Close them, as if they're not gonna be fixed. And so they were like, "We made it to 0 bugs." I'm like, ah.
Do you
No.
want to, since that might have been a little inside baseball, Tina, I think, for some people listening, you want to explain the P's and what you mean there?
Okay, so in Jira, it's a bug database that a lot of game developers use. They love that term, Jira. It's a service you can buy.
Well, tasks and bugs, right? It's for doing all kinds of different.
Yeah. So in you can give each issue or task or bug a priority number. P5 being the lowest, P0 being a blocker or the highest thing that you need to address as soon as possible. So what one of the lead producers decided to do was close everything out as if we weren't going to address it, to make it visibly look like to the publisher that we have 0 bugs or tasks left to do for the gold version of the game. And it infuriated me to no end, and I'm thankful that that person is not working as a producer anymore.
That
It's
is
pretty fucking-
so dumb.
That's pretty transparently deceitful, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay. I want to get
Moving
to
on.
some of the
Yeah.
fan funded questions because
Let's go.
we're going pretty slow through these. I want to mention that maybe
We'll
we
pick it
should
up.
have a segment in each show going forward that reads 1 or 2 of these, because these are pretty good. So
Yeah,
if we
100%.
don't get to your question today, we will get to it eventually. Okay,
Oh,
but
and
I want to
just-
get through the. Go
just
ahead.
I think
before
we can
you
get to them. Let's keep going.
Yeah, just
go ahead.
before we go ahead, just to mention, guys, that Second Wind is fan funded. So
Yes.
if you do, you don't have to, but if you do, have questions, one of surefire way for us to read them out is by donating, and that goes directly to keeping shows like this alive. So we massively appreciate it, and we're going to try and get better at reading them out live on the podcast and engaging with you guys a little bit more. So just want to say thank you to everyone who does donate already. We appreciate you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna post what's left from my original list to the guys, but we have a whole list from the live chat that I want to get through starting now.
Let's go.
Okay, Abdel Corrales donates 5. I don't even know what that is. R.
Our
I don't know
dollars.
what that. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. Hello, guys. Sorry if this was asked before and answered, but how do you think the playtest experience varies from A to AA to AAA to indie? I guess the amount of people.
Yeah, I think amount of people and how good you are at gathering feedback, I think, are probably the 2 biggest things. Also, how rapidly can you do it? Like if you're a AAA, I imagine you could do it daily, and you have the money and time to set that up.
Yeah.
And you honestly, the biggest one is probably just how many people you have, just like you said, Tina. But yeah, go ahead. What's your experience?
So I think Battlefield was the most fascinating for me as an outsider to look at for playtest, because they had a fully stocked QA team ready to play at any time across the globe. So they had one in like the US, they had one in Europe, I believe. But whenever
Wow.
devs needed to play a full match, they had a bunch of like college kids or people that like wanted to be in QA just jump on immediately and would play as long as you wanted with them, and
That's
that
so
was really
cool.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how hard it is to fill a whole server with all these people when you.
I'm
need to test
frowning,
something.
Tina. I'm shaking
Why?
my damn head because like you privileged fuckers. Like it
Yeah.
would have been so nice to be able to.
Imagine having the money
and
to do that.
I still have it in. I'm looking at my Steam right now, and when I was a community manager in like 2014, 2015 for Insurgency, I would just get community members, just players, be like, hey, like, are you okay with doing this kind of annoying, slightly complex process with your version of the game on Steam? And I'd add people on Steam, and I would DM them directly saying, hey, we're doing a
Damn.
test. Please, please. This is a 32-player PvP mode. We need more people. Please come. And I would add nicknames to everybody in my Steam friends alongside my real friends, and it would say, will test Mac, will test Linux, and shit like that.
Amazing.
And it was a fucking pain, dude. It was so
Wow.
difficult. That's fucking. That was when we were more indie than we were AA. But,
Yeah.
But even in the AA process, you know, we had to rally people. There were developers on the team, on teams that I've been on. There would be developers on the team that would be like, I don't want to test. I don't want to play. And we'd have to be like, well, you have to. Like, we have to.
Yeah.
We have to do this. It's a whole other thing.
Indie.
Go ahead.
Oh, carry on, Tina.
I just wanted people to imagine, you know, like in a TV show or movie when someone's like, hey, we need recruits. We need people to come and like volunteer. In AAA, it's so much easier. There's like a whole like, you know, swath of people ready to join, all like with the perfect setups and headsets and controllers all,
Yeah.
you know, juiced up or whatever. And then, yeah, like what you were saying, Mike, you were like Independence Day with farmers and people just like coming to the
Yeah.
military base. Like, I got a crop duster. Let's fight these aliens.
It was so scrappy.
Yeah.
It wasn't as plucky though. It was like, oh fuck Christ, we can't. We're gonna ship a mode and we haven't for 32
Yeah.
players, and it will be played at 32 players when it's public. But internally, we only did like 3 tests of this at 32 players. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that literally happened, but it'd be a situation like that basically.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jay, you were saying.
It's kind of that for indie as well, in the sense of you see a lot of indie games marketing themselves earlier than say some AAA games would, because not just because they need to get their name out there in this sea of, you know, thousands of games being released a day, but also the testing phase is usually just you have some passionate fans and they're willing to come test the game, and you have a community of people that are willing to do it. I know Yahtzee with Star Trek Vagabond did that a lot, put the message out for a lot of the community members, and I believe they were paid. I hope you were paid. I think you were.
Yeah.
And it's getting scrappy, or like, you know, calling in favors to other studios, or like, so for my instance, I've done testing at the universities I used to work at. They are willing to use their students as testers for the games that I'm working on and stuff. So it's a lot of community and industry friend favors that you're calling in, because you know, I think in any situation, but especially in indie, you just want to see your fellow devs game succeed, and testing is a huge part of that. So just got to call on those favors.
Snake in the Garden wants to know, what is your best gaming business trip story? Gotta be fast.
Oh shit. Can we come back to that one? I feel like I've done a lot of traveling for game dev. Or do you guys have one? I'd have to think about it.
One of my favorites was being able to blow up explosives in the desert for audio.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Nobody's
capture
gonna
sound
top
effects.
that.
Yeah,
Nobody's gonna top
we
that.
went to the
Shit.
middle of nowhere. There was a pyrotechnic and some dude that I forgot his title, but he had all of the explosives like safely protected, and there was a bodyguard there to like make sure no one came and mess with the explosives. We set up mics around this huge desert plot area. There was like wild snakes and all this other stuff. We tried to make sure we're clear of the area so no animals were harmed. And then I had to dig holes, throw in C4. It was wild. Fun fact, when you mess with C4 and stuff like that, the residue on your hands doesn't necessarily leave your body for weeks on ends. You can't get on a flight. So we had to drive from the bomb site back home because no airline would have let us.
Because you'd have C4 residue on you.
Imagine saying that to the fucking agent. Like, oh, it's just
TSA.
C4.
Yeah,
come on.
but with a
TSA
girly
agent,
voice,
thank
like, I blew it up for COD.
I blew it up for cut.
you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna top that, Tina. So we can move on.
But there was like Gamescom and stuff, right? You went E3s and
Yeah, no, it was
GDCs.
for me. I did so many. I was super lucky. I got to go to Gamescom. I got to go to Paris Games Week. I got to
Yeah,
go
there you
to
go.
Res in the
Did you
UK.
TGS?
I don't think I did that. Wait, what's
I-
TGS?
Tokyo Game Show. That's the one
Oh
I've
no,
never
that would
done
have been
that I wish I could.
badass.
I really want to do
I had a
Tokyo
very
Game Show.
heavy European bias and like North American bias. Like I did E3, right? I did PAX East and West, or maybe just East. Anyway, yeah. So a lot of my trips were similar, where it was like you get there, it's exhausting, you're on your feet all day, you're showing people it's motivating, it's energizing, but it's also draining. And yeah, I can't think of, or at least I can't pick like a good specific. This was the best story, but maybe we'll come back to that. I'm sure there's one out there. I just have to think of it. Jay, how about you?
I've been fortunate enough to be on quite a few, cons and going to game dev studios to make documentaries and visit them. My favorite one would have been recently. It was this year. I went to Prague with the team making Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and it was like a press event to reveal not reveal the game, but reveal its release date and
Precedents are
play the game.
wild.
It was insane. They took us to Gutenberg, which is the city the game is set in, allowed us to play the game, which is set in Gutenberg, and then afterwards they took us on a city tour where they had fully clothed people in armor holding screenshots of the game, so you could see the accuracy at which they had represented the game, like one for one.
Oh my god.
And then they took us through this entire tour. We then met the mayor of Gutenberg, who thanked the game devs and said it's such an important thing for the country. Talked about the history.
That's
then
very
gave us a full medieval meal and then a recreation of a battle and allowed us to shoot crossbows and bows and hold swords and stuff. And I was like,
Jay,
it was wild.
Those guys got more money than I realized until just now. You described.
They've got a lot of money. Yeah.
It must have done. I'm not trying to take away from the coolness of that, the dedication, the historical value of all that. Meaning the mayor. That's crazy. So I that's all great, but it makes me laugh and go like, that must have been so expensive.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. I got to play a new Battlefield game on a real battleship, and they set up a giant LAN party on it.
On a battleship. That's
Yeah,
wild.
That was really cool. Okay. Go through the next questions. Sussy Guru 2000
Sussy Guru.
gave €10. Says, did you ever argue with higher ups from publishers or tell them outright that specific directions are terrible? Can you get away with ignoring them in certain situations?
You absolutely have disagreements with a publisher, right? Because it's just, look, you have disagreements within your own team. So that like totally happens. In my experience, you can get away with it, but it's not really like getting away with. I've had pretty good relationships like with publishers with whom I've worked through my career. It's usually just like, sorry, we really feel like we have to do it this way. You're just gonna have to trust us. And they say, okay, fair enough. Maybe there's a little bit of friction where it's like, ugh, that's like kind of a point against us. And if you can imagine like Walking Dead style, so-and-so didn't like that. I think there's an element of that, right? Where they don't like that you said no, but they accept that you said no. And if you keep doing that, it might harm the relationship. But it's okay in my career, my experience, to disagree and say like, well, we have to do this. Hopefully, ideally, you have it in your contract where it's clear whether or not you're allowed to, like what your allowances are as far as what you own and what they're, and I don't have too much experience with that because we've always been able to own the creative mostly. But that's a big part of contracts, right? It's like what aspect do they own? What do they have the final say on? When I did the work that I've done with publishers, though, has been pretty much just like when I felt something had to be different, I was trusted. It seemed, and I also had to trust them when they said, "Well, no, really, like it has to be like this." I had to go, "Okay, fair enough. That's your wheelhouse." So it's been pretty good in my experience. What was the second part of the question?
Can you get away with ignoring them in certain situations?
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought I said that, but basically, yeah, I think you kind of can, and it's just because you have to move fast. You shouldn't be deceitful about it, of course, but if you wanted to, you probably could. You could probably be like, sorry, that fell into an old email and we had to move, so we shipped this.
Yeah.
So that would be getting away with ignoring, I guess, but that's not recommended, right? It's not a good way to keep the relationship, and this is a relationship you have to maintain.
One footnote I want to add to build up on your answer, Mikey, is for publishers, a lot of them own the legal approvals of a game, right? So if there's a new creative piece of art or weapon or, I don't know, shoe or something put in the game, sometimes that has to go
Shoe.
through the legal department. Yeah, especially if it's like, you don't want to copy a logo or something, because you
Yeah.
can get sued for that.
I like that you
So,
did the Nike swish with your hand there, just when you.
yeah, I didn't
What
say
logo could this
it.
be?
Yeah. Publishers usually own the legal part, right? So you just send over art and you're like, here's the concepts we used and can we get legal approval? The Red Cross symbol is like the most arguably difficult thing to duplicate without getting in trouble because
Yeah.
legally you're not supposed to put it in any game. I think Left 4 Dead got away with it because they ignored legal. They were like, nah, we're doing it. So I don't know what kind of fee they had to pay
It
to use,
happens.
but
They might
yeah,
have not had to.
you
There's
can't,
there's all kinds of stories there.
it's highly recommended you don't ignore lawyers' feedback, especially when they say, hey, this is too similar
Great
to,
advice,
I don't know.
Tina.
Yeah.
Don't ignore your lawyer's feedback.
Yeah, dude. It happens for content sometimes. And then the other one is if you're working on an intellectual property title. So let's say we're developers working on, I don't know, a Ninja Turtles game. If we get feedback from a publisher, you probably shouldn't ignore it because it's most likely pertains to protecting the original IP, right? It's like
Yeah.
Donatello always is purple, but not that shade of purple. So you can't ignore
That's
that
a really
feedback.
good example. I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you better believe that like it does depend a lot, as we always say. But like you better believe that Space Marine 2, right? Saber couldn't just say to Games Workshop like, "Well, the Ultramarines, wouldn't it be cool if they were orange?" Like that wouldn't fly, right?
No.
It's too iconic. It's too important to the branding. Yada yada. And if you play Space Marine 2, this is just speculation. I think you can kind of tell that Games Workshop had some influence on it because Titus goes from being, Death Watch to straight into Ultramarines. And I'm not going to say it's contrived, but it felt like sounds like somebody might have wanted to push him back into the Ultramarines instead of how the first one ended. But that's I don't know. That's my own speculation.
Yeah, like just another visual example that people can understand. So when you see like a celebrity in a game, there's legal approvals. You got to listen to the publisher on feedback that they get from the celebrity because someone will say, "I want my eyelashes longer." It's like okay, we'll keep doing that. Next question. Peter Parker SL donates $5 and says, from a design perspective, what was the last game you played that made you ask, how did they do that?
Ooh, that's a fun one. Thinking from a design perspective, so not a technical perspective. I'm trying to think about
From a
what that
design
would
perspective.
be. Jay, do you have one? I could think
No,
of one.
I'm thinking
but it's,
it's tough, right? Because a lot of the times I haven't felt from a design perspective, how did they do that in years? Because I can nearly always backwards engineer how they've done a thing. I've
Yeah.
always just been impressed with the idea to do it. Like,
Yeah.
that's ballsy. That's interesting. I really like that. I'm just trying to think of the
maybe
best
let's
example.
let's think of the question, like not to create the question, but like because I think Jay and I agree that like
It's probably from a technical perspective, right? That they're asking.
it could be, yeah, or it could just be like here's how I'm interpreting the question, I guess. How did they arrive at that? How did they come to that decision? I wonder
So
what it
not
looked like
technical.
leading up to that, how they made that work.
Yeah.
And here's one that's kind of on both sides. Foxhole. I've been playing Foxhole lately. Foxhole is a top-down, isometric action game MMO, and in the game, everybody. And please correct if I'm wrong, but this is what I read online and what I experienced from playing for as long as I did. Absolutely every item in the game, or pretty much every item at least, is player created. And you would hear that and you would think, oh, that shit'll never work. You can't get players to coordinate on an MMO scale, right? Hundreds, thousands, just like tens of thousands of players in I don't know, within a week logging on differently, different users. I mean, tens of thousands or whatever their numbers are, I don't know. And then like making stuff to then be used by someone else. And if it gets dropped on the battlefield, it's there forever, right? There's scarcity. When I saw that or I heard that, I thought, oh my God, how did they do that? Like design wise, how are they willing to take that risk?
Yeah.
because when I think about other MMO FPSs, which I wish there were more of, because it would be really interesting and there's a cool design out there. I think of PlanetSide or PlanetSide 2, and not many other Huxley, but I don't think so. That was kind of more of the Korean MMO style, where it's heavily instanced and more about unlocking ship. And in PlanetSide, all that shit was like infinite. Basically, you could have whatever you wanted. It was always there for you. But in Foxhole, a player's got to make it. And it's just a testament to how many players enjoy logistical gameplay and like grinding and sort of repetitive farming things.
What was that
So
called?
that was a
Foxhole?
design that, yeah, Foxhole. Look it up. It's pretty cool. They came out in early access a few years ago, I think, maybe 1 to 2. But I think they had their full release, and they're still adding content. It's imagine like a fictional World War II inspired conflict. So you have automatic weapons, semi-auto weapons, planes. Excuse me. You have tanks, ships, jeeps, half tracks. Planes are coming. They're going to be added, but it's all isometric. If you're familiar with MMOs in the past, I think this was an MMO. It was called Infantry. Infantry was a sci-fi top-down isometric like a shooter game, real time, where you were little guys and you ran, and it was either an MMO or it was just one of the early multiplayer games.
Yeah.
That I think might have inspired Foxhole, but there haven't been many like it, honestly.
It sounds awesome. It sounds really cool. Mine would be something I've spoken about recently in an episode, which would be Cryptmaster. The designs of that game, I've been very fortunate enough to actually talk to the developers of the game after my video came out. The game is, for you guys if you don't know, is a like a type 'em up game. So you type your own words to effectively interact with the world and interact with combat. Using assorted words to jab, to slice, to cast the spells of the people, but also all interactions are done through typing to the NPCs. And what blew me away was I understand that games and games narrative work via divergences. They're effectively controlling the way the narrative is progressing, so it always ends at its predestined destination, because you can't have the narrative infinitely, branch out. So they use clever ways to keep you on the track while making you feel like you're making your own decisions. The thing that impressed me the most was that nearly everything I typed, the NPC would have a voiced, unique response to what I typed, relevant to what I was saying and where. Not for everything. And I tested this out from a game dev perspective. I was like, I'm going to break this. Like, I'm going to find a thing that it won't respond to.
I'm gonna type fusion engine or something like that and see what it says.
Like there was a
arbitrary words.
and then they have generic responses like
Arby's
what
order.
Yeah, they have generic responses then of just like, what are you on about, like acting in confusion. But like, for instance, there's a bit where you have to try and seduce or marry a character for the narrative, right? And I went up and I was just like, I'm gonna be filthy and see how this responds. And it was like, oh, how do you view yourself? And I was like, sexy. And they were like, ooh. And they had this huge dialogue tree of just like being attracted. And by the way, Tina, this person was a giant frog. So it was even better. But anyway, the way it weaved together, the way it always had a response ready and it was voiced, I was like, this is so much dev time and planning. From a design perspective on planning what people will do. For instance, there was your characters, whenever they level up, you get to add another letter to their name, and you can choose whatever one you want. And I called my character like Lexpup, like LEXP or something, just a stupid thing because I'm planning to make it a different name. Mm-hmm. And the character, the Cryptmaster, had a line for if I named them Lexpup. And they were like, Lexpup? What does that mean? Like, that's so dumb. And I was like, how have you planned this? Like, I know how they did it. I'm just in awe that they did. Right? So I highly recommend that if you haven't played it.
Nice. All right. Our next question comes from Eric Burr. Donates $2. Asks, what is the narrative script format for a game? I don't know what he means by that.
As in, like,
I could say
go for it, Mikey.
Real quick, like when it comes to systemic dialogue, you would write if something is going to get sent off to an agency, you want to have it be like in an Excel spreadsheet. You want it to be super clear. This first cell is what you should call the file when you send it to us. You're talking to the agency. This is the level of intensity on a scale of 1 to 10. This is additional direction notes. This character is inside of a house yelling at somebody through a window outside the house or whatever. And then you actually have the line itself. That's kind of a way that you could structure it.
I never dove into narrative stuff like this. That's cool.
Yeah, you have to. It's so much nicer when you lay it out that way for the actor, for the recording session, the director recording.
It's not left up to interpretation when they're in the booth.
Yeah, and it's not even just about interpretation. It's also just about like ease of access, right? You don't want it to be like, where was that line, and I have to scroll down for. You want it to be as easy and smooth as possible. The presentation of the line. You want it all to take up one screen, ideally, so you don't have to side scroll, which mouse wheels don't do, to get to the additional information. It's super important how you present stuff, but that's more on the systemic side. On the narrative side, I mean, I've seen and used just a typical movie script. Right, you can Google, like, there's a format for what a script looks like, as if you printed it out and showed it to a Hollywood producer that you're trying to sell a film. You could write like that. I've seen it like that. I've written like that too.
Yeah.
Cool. The True Mandalorian donates $2 and asks, what show, movie, or game best represent real game dev?
There's not a lot of them, dude.
So,
like, honestly, I can only... Oh, go ahead.
What shows have you seen? There's the one on Apple TV. What's it called?
Is that Mythic Quest? Or is that
yes,
different?
Mythic Quest. There was a movie that was Grandma's Boy, right? Was a movie.
Grandma's Boy. All right, yeah. The Grandma's Boy is like Grandma's Boy is being like a stoner comedy about video games. It's not super accurate.
I don't think either are very accurate.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Mythic Quest is a little better. Mythic Quest is a good like first stab.
Close,
There were some parts that were.
There's two others
as
well.
Comedy, right?
Honestly, I thought the MTX guy in Mythic Quest was more like a producer than the producer.
And I felt like the lead engineer was more of a lead game designer.
Yeah.
From what I remember. Do you felt that too? Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess like every team's different, and that was part of the interesting relationship between her and the Rob McElhenney's character.
I like how she was like a UI engineer and designer and like audio person and all these other things wrapped in one.
It seems, which like again could happen, but they had a big studio. Like I wouldn't think that. Yeah, I wouldn't think that the lead engineer would be doing all that shit. I guess it spoke to her character because she was like kind of neurotic and like really obsessive and like high energy. So like maybe, but I don't know. To me, Mythic Quest was like an okay first try, and it was just cool to see. There were some episodes where I'm like, oh, that one got it right. But mostly it was a workplace comedy, I feel like. It didn't feel too much about the game dev side. And then also, I felt the same way about Grandma's Boy, which is more about like stoner comedy jokes with some accuracies here and there, I guess. Like, I don't know.
I feel like the most accurate show I've seen so far is Silicon Valley, and that's not game dev specific, but it's very much like game
workplace
dev
structure
interactions. Yes,
I was gonna say that one actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was like tech and what engineers are like and what the culture around there is like. That's
all
pretty
of
good.
it.
That's Mike Judge.
Even
I think
like
Mike Judge was an engineer.
marketing and stuff like that, and PR and
Wasn't Mike Judge an engineer himself? Like, didn't he work on F-16 software or something? I can't remember.
There's also some other examples, which is Matrix 4 also is tangentially about game dev.
it is.
Neo is a game dev. Like
I just forgot that there was a fourth
He's a designer.
film. There's a fourth film.
And also Free Guy
there?
with Ryan
I'm gonna
Reynolds
Google this.
is about a
It came
game,
out
and
recently,
the
too.
Sorry, go on.
Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds is about a game and game dev.
Free Guy.
None
That's a
of
good
these
one.
things are good at representing what game dev actually is on any scale, but that's because the very nature of game dev is very slow, and the rewarding dramatic moments come very slowly, and that does not make for entertaining television or movies.
That's why I think Silicon Valley is the best for that, because it's almost like the highs and lows of developing something.
Yeah.
I think it's because it was by a guy. I'm looking it up here. Mike Judge, who's like the creator. He did King of the Hill, creative behind that and other shows in Silicon Valley. He has a physics degree. In 1987, he worked for a startup in Silicon Valley programming for F-18 fighter jets. When you have somebody like that behind it, you get the authenticity, I think, and also he's just a great creative. As opposed to the apparently the starting moment for Mythic Quest was Rob McElhenney met a weirdo from Ubisoft, is how he said it, and said something goofy to Rob, and then Rob called somebody else on the phone and said, "These people are weird. Let's do a show about them." So you're not going to get. I'm not saying it devalues the show. It's just a different take on the culture. It's going to be different because
it's an outsider's
from somebody
perspective
outside
of game dev. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish we could do like a reality show of game dev, but it defeats the whole purpose of trying to make a game quietly and with privacy and not leaking anything. So
you
but
could
that would
do
be
it.
amazing.
I think
it would be awesome, I think.
Game development's growing. I think there's a good, authentic movie or show in our future. The three of us will watch it and we'll be like, "Wow, they actually got that."
Wow, that
part
was
right,
good.
that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Oh,
I mean,
Indie the movie, is that what it's called? The really old
Indie Game the movie?
documentary,
I haven't
Indie Game
seen
the
it.
movie. That's a
that
good
Phil
representation of what it's like to
Something?
be an indie dev. Yeah, Phil
see
Fish and Edmund McMullen, the guy who made Meat Boy. I may have said his name wrong. Apologies if I have.
I did see that.
Good movie. A good depiction of what it's like to be an indie dev, toiling away endlessly at one project for years, going mad. It's a good movie.
Good one. Let's see. I think we just got another. Okay, we got 2 more donations. Dark Jackal donates $5. He says, or sorry, I don't know if it's a he. It's a stream for questions, so obviously I'm not going to ask one today. Thank you for the conversation, team.
Cute.
Hell yeah.
Thank you,
You're
Dark
welcome.
Jackal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sussy Guru 2000 has donated €5 and asks, "How would you rate the depiction of a game dev in the recent Matrix sequel if you've seen the movie?"
Not great, but
I wouldn't rate it. I'm sorry, Jake. Go ahead.
Yeah, just say I don't think it's incredibly insightful to what it's like to be a game dev. But I think that's just the nature of trying to cram a lot of narrative into a 2-hour movie. They just can't represent what it's like in under that scale. It's impossible.
They enter God mode at the end, right? They're just like flying around and shit.
That's the Matrix, man.
I don't. Does that happen?
I know.
I remember.
I think I saw it. Matrix 4 flying. I'm gonna look it up.
Are you thinking of Matrix 3 when they're fighting in the rain?
No, she
around.
flies. No, it's 4. They fly.
God. I thought that the game development aspect of the Matrix 4, I think the main purpose of that was, I think it's partially because the Wachowskis are gamers, right, and they like including that. But I think narratively speaking, it was supposed to be sort of like to put it simply, like a meta thing, where like, oh, here's Neo, and he's in a world making another world. Like I can't remember exactly the plot. I forget what happened, but I remember that he's got an award for being like the world's best designer or something on his desk, and you don't see like what his design process is like. I even wondered, like, did they mean to call him like a developer? Like, is he a designer? What's his job as a developer? That I don't think they even go into it. I think the whole purpose of the depiction of game development there was just because they're being kind of meta, and maybe because they actually used Unreal for part of the movie. It was. I'm not saying it's shallow, like it's stupid. I mean, it wasn't the point of the movie, right? So it doesn't go too in depth from what I remember. But I also don't remember much of it. So
I would say Squid Game is very accurate.
it's the gamiest.
Just is what about layoffs?
Layoffs.
That's terrible. That's dark. No, I'm just kidding. Squid Games is good, by the way.
I need to see season 2. I haven't started yet.
Oh, it's good.
I bet
I haven't
it is.
started the show.
like
I gotta watch the
It's
show.
good. You should watch it.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
All right. I read all of the funded questions. We still have a list of meaty questions I want to get through. I think we'll just divide it up in the next couple of episodes. We'll have like a fan segment.
Sure.
I think that's it for today. For me, at least. Are you guys good?
Yeah, unless anyone in chat has some burning questions that you really want us to answer in this episode, and I'll give you a few minutes to get those in. What other kind of game dev resolutions do you guys have while these questions potentially come in? What kind of resolutions do you each have?
Ooh, for ourselves as
Yeah,
individuals.
as creatives, like what are your resolutions?
I'm just trying to. Well, I'm in an interesting spot because I am now a mom of two, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I put my career on hold so I could raise the kids. So I have this this podcast to help me stay engaged with the gaming community. But also, I've realized that networking seems to be one of my biggest strengths. So I kind of fell into the Producers Guild, and they're pulling me into other things. So I have a panel to do about video game development next Friday
Cool.
with what's his name? I'm so bad with names, but I'm doing a panel for the Producers Guild with the Lucasfilm game studio president. So that's gonna be fun.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Get more involved in that. That's awesome. What about you, Mikey?
Doing the contracting thing means I can, I'm unrestricted, right? And I can choose what I want. And that's been a cool thing about doing contracting. I want to lean more into that, right? And try new things that I haven't experienced before, but feel comfortable with trying. So there's like, to put it, I guess, high level and slightly vaguely, like taking more risks and trying new things within that realm that I am currently allowed as a contractor. Something I couldn't do, or most people can't do in game dev when they're doing the employee thing. Even if it's like a short form thing or long form thing, not being afraid to say like, this is a little like out of my wheelhouse, but I'm going to give it a go. I guess that would be part of my resolution, and or my resolution in total. I'm not a big resolutions guy. I usually just try to do it by the month, but that's one that I've been thinking of recently, disconnected from January. Is like, this is an interesting opportunity. I'm just going to make time for it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see how it goes, even if it's something that I'm a little unfamiliar with. That kind of philosophy has helped me in life. It's kind of what brought me to Meta, right, and working in virtual reality, because I hadn't done virtual reality. But I thought, I'm going to try this. There's other parts about it that I am familiar with and I like. I need to keep that fire going, so to speak, with my current,
Yeah.
career habits.
Oh, one important question we got that I should have started this whole podcast with was if everyone in LA, game dev wise, is safe. And I wanted to say that I know of some studios that had to evacuate. Some smaller studios even took their work PCs home because they didn't know if their studio was going to be there when they got back. Thankfully, it's okay. But there's a lot of game developers in the Los Angeles area. So I know of one person who's an audio director that lost his home, unfortunately. But it's crazy that LA was on fire.
That sucks so much.
Yeah. It's very terrible. I don't know of any. You know better than me, Tina, because you've been here longer than me in LA. But I know that I evacuated, and this is my office. So I guess I evacuated my studio.
You evacuated your
So,
office. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and it
It's a good place
sucked.
to work.
I mean, it's a whole other story, but I'm fine. Everything's fine. It's I was fortunate, of course, obviously, and yeah. I as far as like the effect on game development, I don't think you'll. I guess I know this isn't a direct part of the question, but it's sort of implied. I don't think there is any substantial, like noticeable effect as far as the consumer goes. I don't know of any studios that burned down or that had to they've shut down for the next 2 months because they're dealing with losses from the fires. I don't know of anything like that.
No, thankfully, I think they're all okay. I think the movie industry was hit much worse than video games. Like all the employees that live out in those areas.
God,
Hope
man,
they're
what a
safe.
tragedy.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there's been a lot of great donations coming in from everywhere, so that's really cool to see.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of good donations, Snake in the Garden, €2, says, thoughts on the Game Award winners this year?
I
So
watched
game of the
it all, and
year.
I don't
Pull
even
the list up
remember.
again.
Game of the year
Yeah.
went to Astrobot.
Oh, cool.
I'm pulling up everything so I can get. I just don't remember. I feel like it's been a little while at this point. Who are the winners? Here we go. You winners. Yeah, Astrobot. Blah, blah, blah.
So on the game journalism side, I know that they pick an assortment of game journalists to help vote on these things. Is there anyone from Second Wind on that list? Do you know, Jay?
Nope.
Oh, okay. We got to get you guys on there at some point.
Yeah, no,
I
we
remember-
need those connections, but hey, it is what it is. Yeah, but I think you've touched on something very important, is that these votes are usually done by journalists and not game development professionals or gamers.
Yeah.
It's like journalists, and as someone who has a toe in every pond of, I am a gamer, I am a game dev, I am also technically, I don't like considering myself one, but I am a games journalist in a way. I don't particularly think. I think we should put more. If we're giving a best sound design award, I think that should be voted on by sound designers. If we're giving a best performance award, that should be done by, be it motion capture or audio or directors, right? People who are directing those people, not necessarily journalists who might not have an idea of how these things are put together and stuff like that. And I think we should have more devs on that kind of panel. I'm not necessarily sure if they do. They might do. I might be being ignorant here, but yeah, less game journalists and more game dev, in my opinion. That's just me.
I think the Dice Awards does a great job of that. I
was just gonna say, yeah, that's kind of the Dice Awards. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wish that was a more popular show that was made public.
It might be better that it's not. Keep it pure. Keep it nice.
Ooh.
Keep it pure, pure of heart, pure of
Pure.
game
Oh
dev
no,
heart.
pure sounds like a dangerous word to use here. What I mean by that is
Pure of Mountain Dew and Doritos. No, I'm kidding.
it's like, I don't know. It's more dev focused, and it's nice in that regard.
Yeah.
I wish there was somewhere to watch it though. I wish people could watch it on YouTube or something.
Yeah, and if they wanted to, yeah, that'd be cool. Be a nice thing to do.
I unfortunately have to bow out, but I feel like you guys should answer this last question that came in.
Yeah, we've got
Yeah,
two
sure,
more
sure.
that just came in, but we'll say
Let's do it. And
bye-bye
there's another
to
one
Tina.
too. But
Yeah, we'll go through
Bye,
those.
Tina.
Bye, Tina. You're amazing. Bye-bye.
thank you.
I'm going to have to fix the cameras, but that's fine. Don't worry about it.
Sorry.
See
That's
you later.
fine. Here we go. Boom. So as you can see, everybody, this is, for those watching, this is the hinge of my microphone mount. Oh, and here's more of me. You're seeing me twice. No, now I'm just once but wide.
Once
this
but
is like
wide.
a Mr. Robot style shot where I'm like in the corner of the.
Once but wide
I'm
is
in the
my
corner
favorite
looking-
Agatha Christie
Looking
novel.
lonely in the frame. Thank you, everybody. Apologizes for the technical issues earlier. What Jay is doing now is because Tina left, he's adjusting the cameras so I appear in my slot, and Tina's slot is vacant because she's no longer here. While you're doing that, Jay, I'll
Yeah.
bring up another one of the questions. So here's one. This wasn't a dono one, but I just saw this from Speakeasy. Y'all ever assist like another team or studio on a game, like not exactly a game your side was working on? That stuff happens for sure. I think we talked about that even like last stream or two, coincidentally. So that's a good question. Yeah, it happens where you reach out to another team and you say, hey, we are really struggling with this issue. We don't understand this part of Unreal. Can you help us? And I mean, it really depends on the studio and the relationship between those two people. It's usually dependent on like a personal relationship, I feel like. But yeah, it's not uncommon. It's not that crazy. That could even be for a legal thing, right? It could be for all kinds of stuff. You just reach out to a buddy and say, hey, could you help me out with this question we need to answer or this issue we're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Jay, I know you've said that happens in the indie space too, right?
Yeah, it happens a lot in the indie space. There's been some people I've been talking to recently. I have a very particular art style in mind for this project I'm working on. That'll be announced to people soon. And it's a tricky one to kind of put together. We need like a very specific shader and I'm having trouble putting it together. So I've reached out to some friends in the space who I know have worked on similar things, and getting some great responses back. People willing to help once we get a little bit further into development. And sometimes, you reach out to multiple people. Some people are happy to just do it for free because you're friends and they know it's not going to take up much time. Some people, and this is completely within their right and I think correct, ask for, to be paid for their time. And more than happy to do that because people should be paid for their time and valuable information. So, yeah, it's good. I like it. It's a nice space to be in, but that kind of transcends into double and AAA. So game dev is a very beautiful collaborative space. It's very, very good. All right.
Speaking of collaborative, there's another. Shit, I just refreshed my window and now it's lagging. What was the next question? I just missed it.
All right, let me have a look. We've got SVS Guru 2000 with €5. It says, what's the most far-reaching use of generative AI in game dev that you believe would be legitimate and not exploitative?
Wow, that is an interesting question and a big one.
Yeah.
And a sensitive one, too.
Yeah.
Because, you could... Here's the thing. Legitimate and not exploitative, it's super relative. Any sort of thing you would get an AI to do in game development would be something that somebody could do, right?
Yeah.
So by that definition, I can't think of an example of something that could not be a thing a person could do because AI are built to model human things, right? So by that language in the question, technically, I feel like you could define any AI task as being exploitative because again, it's doing something a human might do. I guess you could say the same of calculators, right? You could say, oh, calculators are exploitative of people who could do basic arithmetic. So I'm trying to think of it in that realm of something around there. And I'm coming up kind of blank. Candidly, I don't have a ton of experience working with AI
no, neither do
game
I.
development.
I think a lot of people are trying to avoid it, which I think is a benefit. I think we're going to see a lot of space over the next 10 years of it not replacing people entirely, but allowing artists and or other systems users to make their jobs more efficient. So be it using a generative AI system that has been fed specific art references by an artist, their own art, to help them quickly generate, be it certain concept pieces or generic kind of backgrounds for their art pieces to better communicate the feel of, they may have hand drawn a, clothing and pose for a main character, but they've also used generative AI to generate effectively their own art style background as well, just as a placeholder, which allows them to do more work on other concept work. I think AI has a lot of space within the concept art world, but not for main pieces, just for additions, not, you know.
Because, and I think I agree with that, because if you're a small team and you don't have, and your artist is busy making, here's what I'm hearing you say, Jay.
Yeah.
You have a modeler. They're busy making models. They're deep in on that, and they're deep in on pipeline stuff. They're doing technical art, and they need to have a concept because they need to inspire themselves to make something because the creative director, the designer said, "Oh, I need this kind of thing in the game." That artist could use generative AI to make a concept piece very quickly, instead of having to spend the money to go hire a concept artist. Obviously, you could argue, oh, that's exploitative because the AI model is stealing the art of artists, or, oh, that's a concept artist that you could hire. But as far as I guess I'm interpreting the question this way of what's far reaching, what's a high yield for a low time investment, this would be one where you're just making concept art and then going, okay, I like the look of that. Now, as an artist, I'm going to make that.
And if
again,
it was
this,
if it was
it has all the
specifically fed
sensitivity,
by
though, of any AI.
yeah,
Consensual feeding, is what
I think the feeding of it is the main point. I would never encourage and would never want to see AI generative art used that has been fed art from non-consenting or non-compensated artists. I'd like to see in the future, because we don't have it right now, just generative AI systems that are fed by the concept artists working there, so they can use it as a tool to better fit their needs, rather than stealing from other artists that haven't consented to their art being used, and then everything becoming homogenous and the same and visually and everything. I hate that. But I want AI to be used more as a tool, especially by indie teams. I haven't seen it been done. I don't do it, but I think there is a realm where that is going to be a thing. But we'll see. We're not there yet, and it's a very messy place that I don't want to touch right now at all. So, as a dev,
the short answer to why this is sensitive is like nobody really knows what's okay, honestly, and also nobody knows how it's gonna get, because it could get worse easily. We could become irrelevant. People could just generate games a few decades from now or 1 decade from now. Who knows? So we'll see. Here's another one from Abdel Corrales, member for 14 months in the Green Gang. Do you see that one, Jay? Can I read that?
Yeah.
How can you be a good team player as a game dev? Mine would be be good at writing up documentation in Confluence or Google Docs or whatever, and be good at task management software using Jira or similar ones. Be clear in the things that you write on both those, because that is an expression of team play, because communicating what you're doing and communicating, like, writing down processes and stuff, making it clear for other members of your team, that's being a good team player, right? This is one of the more subtle ways, I think, that can get neglected. And it's easy to, because like people aren't exactly super jazzed or excited about task management, right? But if you do put the energy and effort into it, and also you check with your team to make sure it works, and you talk to your producer and say, like, did I do this right? That can go a really long way with helping the producer and also helping other team members who go, oh, I need to know what Mike's doing. He's on that task right now.
On that.
Cool. Now I know, because he did that. That's one way. The other one is just a classic human thing of like being a good communicator and telling people, keeping them in the loop on what you're doing, but also like when you're giving feedback, doing it in a respectful way. I like a general rule of a positive and a negative. I've heard the sandwich, positive, negative, then positive. So you sandwich when I say negative, I mean thing to improve.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of a euphemism. But I just like saying, here's something I liked, here's something that I didn't like, and also proposing solutions. I think that makes you a good team player, because you're not making it personal, you're just working on the thing that was presented before you, and you're already offering up ways to make it better, like you're saying it should be.
Yeah, I agree entirely. My point was basically what Mikey said there towards the end, which is become a better communicator in the sense of delivering information and also receiving it. The one thing that I think we can all always improve on is how we receive negative feedback. The implication would be that if you are receiving negative impact, there is something wrong with your idea or the thing you've implemented, and therefore there is something wrong with you. That is not true, and you need to get over that feeling really, really fast, because the time wasted arguing over who's right and who's wrong can waste a lot of development time and can cause rifts in relationships. And that's also on the part of the person giving the feedback. You need to be able to communicate your issues with a certain thing in an effective way, in a way that isn't rude, and then give solutions, right? This doesn't work, but like maybe if we did it this way, or this doesn't work. I don't think this works for this reason, but it might be because of this. Like, can we think of something together to try and get past this, right? Not your thing is bad, you are shit. My thing is better, right? Like, that just doesn't work. So just get better at communicating, get better at receiving information, and then I think you'll just be a better, I guess, person in general. Like, being able to communicate and being able to communicate your wants, your needs, and your grievances in a productive way is just a really good life skill to have, and it's very important in game dev.
Yeah, because it's so much of a personal thing. Like, so much of the work that you do is connected to you, so it's easy to take it personally. But yeah, I'll I'll agree with you, Jay, and I'll emphasize part of what you said, which is like, look, if you spend days, hours on something, and it feels like a lot of time, and you present it and it doesn't get used, or even if your lead says like, no, this doesn't fit, and this is low quality or this part's low quality, that doesn't mean that you're a shitty person. It just means like they're what you're doing didn't fit, and it could be better. It's just like getting rejected when dating. It's just like getting rejected during an audition for something. Like you just weren't the right fit. It could easily be that. Obviously, if your lead is being shitty about it, that's bad, and that's a whole other thing. But let's assume a good dynamic and a good relationship with your team. Just don't take it personally, and keep reminding yourself of that because it's easy to forget. And also, don't feel threatened. Like unless you're on like a really toxic team. If someone says like, "Oh, this wasn't it," or "Oh, this could have been faster. It took you 3 days. It should have taken you 2," that shouldn't mean you're going to get fucking fired. And if it does, then you probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. And hopefully, you can find somewhere better without risking your finances.
100%. And any feedback you get in any degree is a gift, even if it is this thing doesn't work. Like Mikey said, if you spend 3 days on a thing, but then you're going to get very locked in and very like horse blinkers up when you work on something for 3 days, right? You're not going to view what could potentially be a major error as a major error because you're so used to seeing it that you kind of turn a blind eye to it. So somebody saying, "Hey, 80% of this is really good, but there's this one glaring issue," that is a gift of fresh eyes on your thing, and you should take it as such and be like, isn't it great how this person noticed this thing and now we can solve it together and the entire thing can be better, right? Thank you is what you should be saying rather than actually, like, right? And it's just about learning to do that. And I had to go through that journey like very early on as a designer. Whenever my designs would be challenged when I first started, I kind of would take things personally, but you need to find a way internally to get past that because everyone at the studio may be withholding certain people at the top end. If you're in AAA, I don't know. Everyone wants to make a good game and they want it to be the best it could possibly be, and everyone's working towards that. So allow that to happen, but also, don't be afraid to push back sometimes. Sometimes their vision might not line up with yours, and you need to have a bit of a debate. You have to take it as it comes, right? There's no one size fits all for this kind of thing.
Mm. Yes.
100%. All right.
Well said, Jay.
Thank you. Do we have any more? Or I think that might be it.
Yeah, any last questions, throw them in there. Looking at Tina's list. So people who came in late, we're answering all of your questions that are game dev related. Tina compiled a list of questions. We still have some there, which is great because we have a lot of questions. I think we're going to try to find a way to answer them another stream, though, because we're getting to the end here and we got to go. But when I look at the list, I see there's at least, there's a good few. So we'll try to get to these next ones. So don't worry. We saw your question. But we want to make sure that these are the pre-stream gathered questions. We're just trying to make sure we spend some time on live questions too.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions that you've asked and have somehow slipped through our grasp and we haven't spotted them, I know a lot of you here are in the Discord. We have a DevHeads channel. We're going to get a lot better at this year at being active in that channel and receiving your questions there. So don't be afraid to copy, paste, or repeat the question you asked. And put it in there and we'll compile it into a list, so hopefully we have some more questions to answer on future streams. We want to get better at that.
You can straight up ping us, and I think if you scroll up in the DevHeads podcast chat on Discord, you will notice that we answer most of the pings, so we're happy to be available there too. Mostly dev related stuff, but also whatever. I think we've had some other funny pings. I can't remember.
Topical ones.
If you're curious what we had for breakfast, feel free to reach out, and we'll do our best.
Especially breakfast. We're always keen to talk about breakfast.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big breakfast. I have all these different cereals, and they're so interesting to me, and I'd love to share that with all of you. Do we want to get a Discord link in the chat?
Eric, are you able to put a Discord link into the chat? If you're still here, he might be having internet troubles again.
We'll see.
No, I can.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Okay. So,
Thank you, Eric.
also, guys, if you guys ever see anything happening in games discourse and you're wondering the dev head's perspective on that, feel free to pop that question in there and we'll try and either compile it into something we can talk about on a podcast or answer you directly there, because we understand that because we're commonly having guests to talk about specific topics or their own works, it is kind of difficult for us to answer the questions about, you know, things that are happening in games in the immediate space. So if you would like those questions answered, you know, just pop them in there and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. But other than that, I think, Mikey, that we are done. This
I
pod
think we are,
is
Jay.
over. We're done.
Let's just say
yeah.
you're right. Let's just say sorry about all the technical issues before, guys. And again, we're going to try to. This is part of our New Year's resolution. Be a little bit more engaged with all of you. We do a lot of work here on Dev Heads to make sure that you see we have interesting guests on, we have interesting discourse topics to discuss, but we also want to make sure that you feel involved. So know that that's something we're going to strive to do better in 2020.
100%. All right. So
like, go on the Discord and say hello to us. That's the big. We're pushing that because we had a conversation about this, and we were like, let's just centralize it to the Dev Heads podcast channel on Discord. That's the best spot to get us.
Yeah, we'll be there. We'll be there talking to you. So, I guess from all of us here, actually, wait, no, I'm good. So everyone here, a second wind from me, Mikey, and Tina, who isn't here, and Eric in the background. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder that all of this, a second wind, is supported by your wonderful support, fan funding on Patreon and YouTube. So to everyone who donated and everyone who's a Patreon already, thank you so much. And if you do enjoy this content, why not consider giving $1 a month, not a month, over on Patreon.
$1 a month.
$1 a month.
A dollar or a month, which is an obscure currency from the country of Liechtenstein. I'm making this up.
We've had some donations from them before, and I didn't know how to pronounce their currency name either. So yeah, consider supporting us over on Patreon. Letter. Yeah, from supporting us over there, so I can have speech therapy lessons. I'm
fucking interrupting you, Jay. I'm making it worse. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate you. And everyone who does support us already, we massively appreciate you. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thank you so much. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for asking questions. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.